What's up guys, it's Avery here. I normally make about $3,000 a month for my 2 long-term rental properties, but I recently decided to launch my first Airbnb because I saw so many people on social media talking about how much money you could make through short-term rentals as well as Airbnb. I thought I'd give it a try. And after my first month, I'd say I like long-term rentals a lot better. Hope you're having a good morning, evening, night, whatever time it may be when you're watching this. And in this video, I'm going to go over what I've learned after having an Airbnb for 1 month. And at the very end of the video, I'm going to share the numbers of how much money I've actually made to see if it's actually worth it. So make sure you stick through the end of the video if you're curious how much money you could actually make with Airbnb. And I'd also appreciate it if you'd hit that like button before we'd start to help me out for that YouTube algorithm. So I'm just going to hop right into 4 main things that I've learned after having an Airbnb for a month. And that first thing would be about why so many people talk about it and want to do it. There are many markets out there where you could buy long-term rentals and maybe achieve $100 or $200 a month in cash flow per door. So if you're thinking about wanting to hit your financial freedom number and you might want to make $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a month, it can start to add up how many rental properties you actually need to own for you to actually make that amount of monthly cash flow. So when you look at it from a short-term rental perspective, and you could see you could make $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month from that same property versus the $200 a month, you're probably going to try out the short-term rental method instead of a long-term rental. And I think why short-term rentals are so popular and something that I've learned is because a lot of people are doing very well with them in cheap markets. You might find a $200,000 or $300,000 house in an inexpensive market that again could maybe get you $100 or $200 a month of cash flow if you had a long-term tenant, but with that short-term rental you have very high average daily rates, almost pretty comparable to expensive cities, and you could just make a lot more money. So if you can make $200, $300, $400 a night in a really inexpensive area, whereas if you're still making that $200, $300, $400 a night in a really expensive market, you might as well put in that extra work to make it a short-term rental and make a lot more money. So I was someone who came from an expensive market, and the first properties I ever bought were in Boston, and the rents there are pretty high and they go up pretty consistently, and I think you can make a lot more from a long-term rental than you could from a short-term rental. Plus, it's a lot less work than it would be to have a short-term rental at those same properties that I own in Boston. The second thing that I learned is that it's just way more work to have an Airbnb, management, even get it set up. With my long-term rentals, I don't even know if I did anything last month other than put in some accounting and bookkeeping for the water bill that I paid. Other than that, every single person had auto pay through apartments.com where they paid me on the 1st or a little bit before. And then my last tenant who's not on auto pay is Section 8, and the government direct deposited money into my account on the 1st. So that's a lot less work than the constant guest communications that you're dealing with when you have an Airbnb. And yes, I'm in my first month of Airbnb. I don't have all of the kinks worked out, but all of those people who say they manage or own 5, 6, 7, 8, however many Airbnbs and spend 3 to 5 hours every single week on them, I just have to think that they're lying, or they have a bunch of virtual assistants helping them out with guest communications. Because I have all of those automated platforms. I have a smart lock so that you can enter a code that gets automated sent to you in a message that I'm not actually doing. And I have the automated pricing tools. So I have all those standard automations that everybody talks about, but I still feel like there's a lot of questions that you have to answer that's not just about Wi-Fi, something about the general area. I even have an online guidebook that the guests receive through their very first message that they get at their stay, and they can go through there and understand everything. And I think it has lessened a lot of the questions, like how to use the thermostat, how to get in, what the internet is, or things like that. But there's a lot of detailed questions that guests might have about their stay that you just have to answer, and I don't think a virtual assistant might know, and just something that you need to know about the area. Like my property is in a golf area, so many people ask about what type of golf that you can play or where you could play, because there are some restrictions for various courses that might be private versus public. I also feel like you're fairly consistently communicating with the cleaner and asking how that guest was, and maybe if you started having more properties, you could just do automated reviews and always give everybody a 5. But there are a couple of people who've already stayed at my property that I would never rent to again. The very first person that I had left pizza stains on the walls. They were very unclean. There were a bunch of stains on all of the new bedding that I had, which was definitely kind of upsetting, especially them being my first guest. Still give me a 5-star review. But you're communicating with your cleaner, seeing how well that guest did, so you can leave a review, whether it be good or not, to see if you want to rent to them again. So there's some decent back and forth there. Also, maybe you have a Ring camera system and you're checking it from time to time because you're curious and interested. That's something that I turned off pretty quickly, all of the notifications for Ring, because I didn't want to keep looking at the camera and seeing what was going on. But you're definitely just more in tune with what's going on and you're paying more attention to it. And you're probably also going to be looking at your Airbnb insights a lot to see how many views, wish list additions, click-through rates, other things like that that your Airbnb has. And you might want to make some changes so that it can rank higher in search. So you're just thinking about it a lot more than you would be if you just had a long-term rental. So I'd say overall in my first month, I'd probably spend closer to 5 to 10 hours a week on the Airbnb. And I currently only have one, and I have all of those other automated tools with it. And I would say with my long-term rentals, which I have the 5 units and I'm dealing with 5 different tenants, I probably spend roughly 1 to 3 hours a month dealing with those properties. The third thing that I learned is that everything has to be perfect. Pretty much perfect, because if you have these guests and something isn't perfect, they're going to let you know about it. The second day message that I send to all guests is if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, and only one of the 6 or 7 guests that I've had so far has actually said something, and then I've gone ahead and fixed it. That's something that I've noticed that has happened so far, where at the end of a stay, someone has given you their questions, comments, or concerns, put it into a review or whatever, rather than just telling you about it, even though you've given them the opportunity. And if not absolutely every little thing is perfect, they're gonna comment about it. You could be 98% of the way there, but maybe you forget to leave out an extra thing of toilet paper. Maybe your driveway's a little bit dirty because there's some leaves on it or something, and your landscaping person hasn't come, and it's been a while since they've come, and then that guest comes in, and during the time that they're staying there, it's a short period and they're not there, so it just seems dirty while they're staying there, and they'll comment about it. So there's all these little details that you really have to care about, because you're hosting an experience and you're really not just hosting a tenant for a place for somewhere to stay. And the last thing that I learned, and probably something that I'll get over as time goes on and I feel more confident about the property itself, is that none of this is guaranteed income. With a long-term rental, you know you're going to be receiving those rents every single month. You don't really have to think about it. Again, my tenants are on auto pay or direct deposit because they're Section 8. But with Airbnb and short-term rentals, you have no idea if anyone's actually going to book the property. Maybe as a year goes on or 6 months and you see bookings happen, you feel more confident about it, or you have more data for a year's worth of bookings. But right away, you have no idea if anyone's actually going to book the property. Right now, I have a pretty good consistent rate of getting a booking roughly every 7 to 10 days, which I don't think is too bad. Maybe it could be more after I rank higher on search and have more reviews and things like that. But a month from now, I have no one renting the property, and it's possible that no one could rent the property for that entire month. Now, I don't think that will actually happen, but it's possible and something I'm thinking about, and it's not guaranteed income the same way it is with your long-term rental. And because that income isn't as guaranteed, I think it makes me think more about the Airbnb, and I'm always thinking about little ways that I could make it better, to make it more searchable, to rank higher on search, potentially add some better photos, even though it already has really nice photos and it's a very high quality property. I'm just always thinking about it a little bit more, which takes up more time in my headspace. But thinking back to when I first started renting out long-term rentals, I was always thinking a lot more about whether the tenant was actually going to pay, whether there were any issues, and being a little bit more stressed out if there was a maintenance problem. I've gotten over that a lot, so maybe I'll get over this a little bit more, especially as I have a longer time with booking. And the other thing to think about is that when you're a brand new host and you do all of these running of numbers and see how much money that you could make, you're still a brand new host. You're not going to rank as high on search unless you do all of those nice things for your property. Like my property has really nice photos, it's very inviting, good descriptions, all of those very positive things. But I'm not a super host. I have 2 reviews on Airbnb and 1 review on VRBO. And so it's maybe not as trustworthy to the person out there, and it's just going to take some time for your property to actually rank higher on search and be more searchable so more people actually book it. So now to the actual fun part of the video, where you can see how much money I actually made on my Airbnb in its very first month, which it actually did quite well. July is obviously a month where people are doing more traveling, and so I hit it at a pretty good time, and I made some pretty decent profit from my very first month on Airbnb. So looking at my notebook here, I made $6,294.05 in revenue, which I don't think is too bad. I put my listing at a pretty low rate in terms of average daily rates, so I could drum up more business and get more reviews. Plus, the first 3 listings for Airbnb and VRBO got a 20% discount, which is something that helps push your listing higher. So I accepted that from Airbnb and VRBO. So those numbers are probably a little bit lower than what I would normally get from revenue if it were completely packed up for the month, because I actually had like 95% occupancy for the month of July, which was really high. Again, I pretty much just wanted reviews, so I kept those prices at a good rate so that more people would click through to them. And in total of expenses, and this is inclusive of the mortgage, I had $3,625 worth of expenses, and my mortgage is $2,057. I think I had a few more expenses than I normally would, just because there were a few issues to get through and things that started, as well as the first guest kind of messed up a few things, so I had to pay the handyman to fix some stuff. There was just a few more expenses than I probably had anticipated. I was thinking I'd have roughly the mortgage of $2,057 plus about $1,000 or so of expenses every single month, and then I added a little buffer to have about $40,000 of expenses for the year with the mortgage and that monthly expense rate. So if you're very good at math and you did it before I already told you, you could see that my total profit for that month was $2,625.05. which is obviously a lot more than the $100 to $200 that I potentially could have made as a long-term rental. But the thing is, I don't really like saying that this is my cash flow for the month. Sure, I can say it if we just look at the specific month, but if next month I make negative $1,000 or in December I make negative $1,000, then I don't really view this as cash flow. I like to look at cash flow, especially for an Airbnb, on an annual basis because it gives me a better sense. Because it is a short-term rental and things are cyclical and seasonal, my daily rates might be lower in the winter and might get less bookings. So I'd rather have a full year's worth of data to confidently say what my cash flow actually is for a month, rather than looking at one of the most booked months that I could potentially have of the year because it's the summer in comparison to January, and just saying that that's actually what my cash flow is. So I'd rather have a year's worth of data before I could confidently say what the cash flow for this property should actually average out to every single month. So let me know in the comments if you think that's more or less than you thought I could have made on my first month of Airbnb. And the other thing that I actually don't really like about Airbnb, because way back at the beginning of this video, I don't know how long it's going to be, I did say I preferred long-term rentals, mainly due to the time that you could put in. Also, the cash flow I think is not that much less for the amount of effort that you could put in, especially if you're in a nice, expensive, desirable city like Boston, where my properties are. But the thing I don't like is that when you're talking to banks and looking to buy more properties, most likely that mortgage that you have with this Airbnb property is going to be counted pretty heavily towards your debt to income, and all of the rental income that you're getting, even though it's very high, you will not be able to utilize for at least 2 years. And it's similar to 1099 income. So even if next year I made double the amount of money I made this year, they're going to take a lower average and it's just going to have to keep adding up. So if I want to buy more and more properties, I think it potentially could be slower if I'm going through conventional loans. Now, there are plenty of other ways to finance things, but my first 2 properties never have really hurt me from a debt to income perspective because they're long-term rentals that's more guaranteed income. Banks prefer that income compared to the short-term rental type of income. Now, they prefer most W-2 income, but long-term rents definitely are preferred over short-term rents when it comes to the perspective of a bank and you wanting to qualify for more properties so you can get more cash flow in your life. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that video, and if you have more questions about Airbnb or setting up a short-term rental, let me know in the comments down below. I'm definitely not going to become a short-term rental or Airbnb channel, but I definitely have some good knowledge about it, and I set it up just through figuring things out and watching videos. So if you have questions from it or want to learn from some of the mistakes I made, let me know in the comments. I'll be sure to answer them or potentially make more videos about the topic. And if you guys like this video, I'd really appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button and like the video if you haven't done so already. And you can even tap that notification bell if you want to see and hear more videos like this one and be notified when I put them out. If you guys like me here, don't forget to check me out on TikTok as well as Instagram, where I also make content daily in a similar format, short version format about the same type of topics. So thanks again for watching, and more wealth is coming your way.